Welcome back to the Gutology podcast. Today, Julia sits down with Katie Ward. She's the managing director of Microbes. They're a family-run company at the forefront of soil-based probiotics and beneficial microbes that support both human and environmental health. This week, how Microbes came to be and the team's background in biological microbiology, the fascinating connection between soil and human health, and how an ecosystem-based approach is gaining traction in wellness. Plus, Julia and Katie will be answering some of your questions.
Hi Katie, welcome to the studio. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Great, I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too.
Could you start off by introducing yourself for our listeners and how you got involved in the microbial world?
Sure. So my name's Katie. I'm the Managing Director of Microbes Probiotics. So we make a range of probiotics for humans, animals and soils in Wiltshire, and we've been doing it for about 20 years. And what we're really interested in is kind of how microbiomes work in soils and also in human health, and how kind of our human health system is connected to soil and food and farming.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're working with farmers and trying to increase the awareness of this philosophy of working.
Yes, definitely. So there's this whole movement into kind of regenerative farming and away from the use of herbicides, pesticides, glyphosate, and this understanding that those pesticides and herbicides have a real impact both on human health and also on environmental and ecological health. So in terms of soil, when we think of soil, it really is an incredibly diverse living ecosystem. So some people say a teaspoon of healthy soil contains more microbes than there are people on the planet.
Wow, that's such an interesting fact.
So it's not just dirt, it's this incredible living ecosystem. And the microbes in soil also support lots of other life in soil, so nematodes and worms. So one sign of kind of healthy soil is to put a fork in the ground and dig up some earth and see how many earthworms you can see, because that's a real sign that the soil has enough air to have water structure, it's not compacted, and that can bring down carbon, it can grow healthy roots. So there's this whole system of soil microbes that support the growth of plants. And the trouble with the overuse of kind of herbicides and pesticides, aside from the kind of human health issue, is that they have a real impact on this microbial living community in soils.
I see. So is it reducing the diversity of that community in the soils, or is it other effects?
Yes. So, I mean, so glyphosate will kill microbes, and then the herbicides and pesticides are kind of, they hijack, or they don't allow the natural system of the soil and the fungi and the plant to interact. They kind of bypass that system and just inject the fertilizers that are kind of needed for plant growth, and not understanding that in a natural system, the plants get that through the soil microbes rather than, but it just, it hijacks or bypasses that system.
So it's isolating minerals that are good for growth and yield, but it's maybe not allowing other nutrients out of the soil to be absorbed because it's overtaking, it's dominating the absorption pathways,
Yes, exactly. And of course it has a big impact on ecosystems in terms of, there's quite a lot of, they want to kill the pests, but that also kills quite a lot of butterflies and bees and things that are really beneficial as pollinators. So, we're coming to an understanding now of the fact that the use of these things has an impact on soil microbes and human health. And the question is, how do we rebuild this biological community? And regenerative farming is really all about that. It's about how can we farm in better harmony with nature. And we're kind of experts in developing products from soil-based microbes, and we've seen them be used in many areas and be really beneficial.
I think there's been a lot of significant misunderstanding over the use of glyphosate and how safe it is, because coming from the human perspective, as I do, seeing conditions clinically, health conditions, glyphosate is it damages a pathway that impacts bacteria. It's called the shikimate pathway. And bacteria have these, and that's how they make certain products like amino acids and things like that. And so humans don't actually have this pathway biologically. So that's when the misconception came that it can't be toxic to humans because humans don't have the shikimate pathway, but bacteria do. So what's our microbiome made of that is actually outnumbering our human cells by bacterial cells? So it does have a significant impact on human health because it's altering our microbiome, which then drives our immunity, our hormones, our detoxification, our mood, our brain health, everything. So I think that's where the huge misunderstanding has come from the use of glyphosate, because actually it's not in a lab. Does it affect a human cell? No. But do the microbes in our gut be affected enormously by that? And then that translates into human damage.
Yeah.
So it's been linked to lots of neurological conditions now, and issues with making proteins in the body, because what it actually does is it causes the body to substitute glycine. So glycine is amino acid, and in proteins it's just a lot of amino acids joined together in a particular shape, and that makes a protein that then has a particular function in the body. So if you start switching out glycine for something else, then you're going to make a protein that's a different shape. And everything is very dependent on chemical shape and orientation in the body. If it's not just right, it won't have the biological effect it's designed for. So a lot of misshapen proteins are a result of using glyphosate because of the impact it has on the gut microbes and the amino acids. And so it's so significant for human health.
I find that incredible. And I also, it reminds me of the kind of chemical toxic load in terms of quite a lot of things I would imagine have also been tested directly on human cells and not on microbiomes. And then they've only been tested independently, so not together. You know, there's I don't know, hundreds of different chemicals in our homes, even though each of them are tested individually for its health and human health impact. What about this combined impact? But I would say, I would agree with you that glyphosate is the kind of worst offender in soil health and in human health.
I think I'm really getting the parallels between the human microbiome, the soil microbiome, a whole world ecosystem. If we're getting devastation in one area, it's also devastation in the other areas as well. We need to work with all of the ecosystems to build a better health.
I would definitely go to the extent that what I'm starting to understand is that as humans, we're really reliant on the soil ecosystem in terms of our health, and potentially, as we face this human health crisis, we might not be able to get through it without also at the same time addressing our ecological health crisis. So if we put energy into rebuilding our soil health, our soil microbial life, that will have a big impact on human health through the food that we're eating. And there's this idea that we're fundamentally completely connected to nature. So we've been inadvertently destroying this soil microbiome ecosystem to grow very, very high yielding food for since the Second World War. And that impact is now filtering through into human health. So for me, it's a shame, but it's also very inspiring. It's like suddenly waking up to this understanding that we are ecological beings. We're connected to the land, even though we've built houses and, we've built all these systems and structures to be comfortable. There's still this direct link to it from our bodies to the soil and the environment. And the more that we can understand that, the more we can find a way back to our health. So the way that a plant gets its nutrients is through its stomach, which is its root system. And around the root system is something called the rhizosphere, which is where the plant interacts with the soil through a microbial process and fungi, which can reach out kind of 700% beyond the roots into the soil to get nutrients and to get all the things that we need to build a healthy plant. So zinc, copper, iron, polyphenols, all of those key nutrients.
So the fungi are like working with the roots of the plants and then extending further than the roots can reach, and then going out and collecting nutrition to deliver back?
Exactly.
Wow. And
it's a microbial, as the microbes are part of that process too. And there's an incredible level of complexity here. Different microbes doing different jobs, working with fungi, working with roots, working with the organic matter. So one thing that microbes are really good at is breaking down organic matter, something that you need for healthy soil. So,
what do you mean by organic matter?
So dead leaves, if you're into composting, that's organic matter. So things that are rich in nutrients and carbon. I mean, if you're on the forest floor, you've got lots of things falling off trees and, lots of natural organic matter, dead animals in the forest, that kind of thing is all natural elements that microbes break down into soil and then, so two jobs that microbes are really good at. One is breaking things down and breaking it down into component parts. And the other is kind of building life. So building roots, building bodies. It's kind of the two things that they're really good at. But yes, exactly. Through this system underground and living soil, that's how nutrients get into plants and foods that we eat.
So what would happen to, say, the fungal networks underground if you were using the NPK types of fertilisers and applications? Does it affect them, or do they stay okay and it just affects the microbes? What happens?
Well, there's lots of different kind of things happening here, but essentially in areas that use quite a lot of herbicides and pesticides, you don't have that living system. So you just have one type of crop, and often the implication, the use of those things is to kill off weeds and everything else. So it has an impact on the ecosystem's biodiversity, which has an impact on the microbes. And when you harvest in regenerative farming, they do something called no-till. So they don't kind of turn the top layer of the soil, which means that fungal network stays in place more. Whereas traditional farming, there's a lot of turning, and that breaks up the fungal networks.
Ah, I see. The parallel to the human gut microbiome is huge here, because when we lose diversity, which we are losing diversity decade by decade in the gut microbiome, and we know that now and it's been studied, we still don't know an awful lot of information about exactly the nature of this destruction, but it is definitely reducing in diversity, and health-wise we associate that with it's got less capacity to do the jobs for the human body. So you get more susceptible to disease, more susceptible to allergies, and your ability to clear the chemicals out of your body, like all of that gets affected. But in the soils, it seems as there's this absolute striking parallel where we're losing diversity in the soils. So how we need to join this up. How can we connect it all together to really understand the whole cycle of it?
Yeah, I mean, I would go as far as to say, and it's kind of coming up more and more, that our ability to regain our health is directly connected to ecological health. So if we can regain more soil health, as humans, we will start to regain that microbial diversity in our bodies. So, this really puts the human directly in contact with nature. The impact of losing microbial diversity in soil leads to health crises.
Just thinking about how the ecosystem and the biodiversity is beginning to lack with our modern farming practices. So we know that is in parallel with the gut microbiome and what's happening there. And we're losing diversity in both areas. So, my focus is on the clinical side and the human health. Your focus is more on the whole ecosystem of all of it and bringing it back. So it's trying to kind of link up all those dots really of how we can't possibly separate ourselves with the environment. What's happening there is mirrored in us. So
totally.
how do we go back to a joined up thinking of this? And
yeah,
the other thing that's on my mind is, so far we've just talked about the farming aspect and the soils and beneath that. But another thing we probably should touch on is then what happens next. After harvesting, there's an awful lot of things that can destroy the microbes to preserve the life. So even if it was quite a nutritious thing when it was plucked out of the ground, what then happens next before it goes onto your shelf in the shop? Can we talk a little about that?
Yeah,
just to add the context, really.
So I think about this a lot in terms of kind of nationalisation, globalisation and relocalisation. So, we're in a situation now where we've set up these national and international systems for food production, which have a big impact on the food that we eat, to the extent where if I met a farmer the other day who was growing his carrots in somewhere around here and wanted to sell them to a Welsh school. And there's only one place in the UK now that washes and packs carrots. So we had to send it all the way to Shropshire or somewhere far away, in order to have it washed and packaged to go back to Wales. So that's one indication of kind of the fact that we've built this food system which supports supermarkets and supports this idea, supports supermarkets. And the negative side of that is that it potentially washes things in chemicals, it potentially packages things in plastic. So there's a whole process there which isn't about just plucking it from the ground and selling it in your farm shop. And I think it's evident that there's a lot of desire for farm shops. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful in the UK, because there's a push back to the land, back to farm shops, back to eating more naturally. And I think that needs to be celebrated. So you have this carrot, say, and it's in the ground and it's in a very healthy environment, and through its rhizosphere and its roots and its fungal networks, it's managed to absorb all this lovely nutrients. And then in terms of its process, as you eat that carrot, there's another microbial process in your body, which you'll probably know more about than I do, where it's digested and assimilated, made bioavailable to build a healthy body. I just find these two processes really fascinating, and the fact that it's microbes at the centre of both of these processes, and how they can change the banana that I ate for breakfast into me. I mean, that's quite an incredible thing. And I would say more research needs to be done into how much our food is losing in terms of nutrient density, and because we don't need to know where we are. So there is some studies that have been done globally about a carrot being grown in one area being very, very different to a carrot that's grown in another area in terms of its nutrient density. So that would mean you'd have to eat lots of them to get the nutritional value of one.
And do you think with the way that the food system generally works at the moment, the end product, is it very different? Or despite its origin, do they all end up the same sort of nutrient deplete carrots, or is there still that variation in the nutrient content?
I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of variation in the nutrient content. And the only thing that, there's been a lot of kind of different research about this, but the only thing that seems to be correlated to that is life in the soil. So how alive is the soil that you've grown that carrot in? How many microbes, how many worms, how much fungi, how alive is that soil? But I think there's a lot of research, especially like UK-based research, because most of this is US research, that needs to be done to really assess where we are, because we know that child health is an issue, and there's chronic disease is an issue, and I would call for much more research into this nutrient density question and solutions to support basically preventative healthcare, which is, through a system, and also regeneration of ecological systems, which, needs that wider lens.
It's quite a big task, though, isn't it? Because we've got a lot of people to feed. And I think that's the argument for having these systems that aren't necessarily so good for us, but at least it's got food, at least it produces food for everybody. But I think that's a big issue, isn't it? I love organic food. I'm a real proponent of organic food, but then I deal with people that are really ill.
Yeah.
So I have to try and remove as much toxicity as I can from their diet and their foods. But in reality, if everybody were to eat an organic food diet, there's not enough for everybody. So where does it leave us? There's bigger issues, isn't there?
I just think this is such a fascinating topic, and also it is the sticking point. Is the how do we feed everybody, and the cost of food is the two big barriers. And in terms of the how do we feed everyone piece, my thinking is, what's the point in feeding 1 million people with a carrot that doesn't have any goodness in it? They'd need a lot more of them than if you actually made a carrot that was really nutritious. They wouldn't need as much of them. So you don't need a lot of these phytonutrients and stuff, but you need them regularly and every day. You need to be having them. And if there's none in your carrots or whatever, then you need to change that system. And then there's a wonderful company called Pasture for Life who recently did a piece of work about organic milk and milk that was made with regenerative cows. And there's their research shows there's quite a lot more omega-3 and other really essential nutrients that come through milk from cows that are pasture fed, so they're out in the grass and they have that kind of relationship with the soil and the grasses and the microbes there. And they did a piece of research that showed that can we feed the UK on organic pasture-fed milk? I think the answer was basically we can at about 80% of where we are now. So there needs to be change in human behaviour.
Okay.
People need to understand why it's better for their food systems to be more connected to nature, see the value in that, and potentially change their habits. And we know that this is the real sticking point.
Yeah.
People
like a Krispy Kreme at the end of the day, don't
yeah,
they?
exactly.
I came across something recently where it was a scientific sort of intervention, and their interest was how to make processed food healthier.
Yes.
It's almost like an acceptance of where we're at as a nation,
yes.
westernised society, I suppose you would extend that to.
Someone
and what can we do to actually make processed food more healthy? Because people are so addicted to it that they've lost sight of what natural food is like, and taste buds have changed, and they need the sweeteners and the chemicals and the flavour enhancers and things, otherwise they don't like the taste. So it's trying to work, how do we move forward? We can't go back, can we? We can't go back. It's just, how do we move forward now?
Or how do we take the best of both? How do we learn from someone came to us from a university recently, and they were creating a technology which was all about how to make microbes survive really extreme temperatures. And their example was like, wouldn't you want to put your probiotics into a pot noodle and ensure that it could be encapsulated so it would survive that heat? I was thinking, wow, this is real Frankenstein stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess this is how we got into the processed food environment. It's like, what can we do to make this molecule like this molecule? And
there does seem to be a big movement in that way, though. I mean, I think in the clinical world, this is how I practice, is a reconnection with nature, whether that's that you need to be touching the soil for grounding. So that's, the kind of perspective that I come, it's grounding, it's connection with the earth. And there's a huge electrical field there that really supports our body instantly the second you touch it. So that's usually a perspective I come from. And we know from the gut microbiome perspective, if you're a gardener, say, and you have contact with the soils routinely, and, your bare feet on the grass, you are picking up an entire ecosystem that is not present in an indoor environment. So, it's reconnecting. We have become, with just our lives and the way that the world has developed, very disconnected from the natural world, the natural environment, the natural cycles. But I do feel that there is quite a lot of movement in that direction, people wanting to reconnect, people not even knowing how as well, because living in cities and urbanised environments, it's not easy to access these things sometimes.
Definitely. And we also know more and more about how that touching the soil every day really impacts your immune system. So there's been quite a lot of really good studies about, just rubbing your hands with soil every day, and that boosts your immunity. I have this vision that at the farm we could create something that isn't like a spa, but it's like a big trench dug in the ground, and people could sit, and they'd sit with their feet or knees dug into the soil for half an hour every day, and
Sounds wonderful.
See how that would impact their immune system.
I can imagine that in the UK weather with the rain, it would be filled with water. It's sort of a
Glastonbury style.
Cold, muddy spa day. I think you could do a little bit of marketing for that.
But it is this connection, this connection on a daily basis to the land, and as we grow into cities, more and more people in cities, there is a way to do that. It doesn't have to be out in a garden every day. It can be soil in your house with a window box, growing herbs. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to have a big garden. I don't want it to make it inaccessible for people.
Absolutely.
It's really important that people don't feel like this is just a country thing, but find ways to bring these areas into our urban environments, into our homes, through pot plants, through herbs. There's lots that we can do in that area.
Okay, so let's get back to your personal experience then with the microbes, and tell me about your love for microbes and when did it start?
Well, it's a family love, I guess. So 20 years ago, my dad was working with inventors, and he was taken around the world to see lots of different environmental inventions, kind of making clothes out of plastic in Africa and all these ecological inventions. And he went to Australia, and he found something then which was called microbial balancing technology. And he came home, and he went for a long walk on the downs with my mum, and they chatted about it. And they both felt like it was a real solution for human health and planetary health. They got excited about it, and they just started brewing on the kitchen table, little jars of probiotics. So it's a fermentation process. And from there, we've developed it into a 4-step fermentation process. and added in kind of herbs and minerals. What kind of excited us was that we use these probiotics on our land in Wiltshire, on the land, in the garden, in our homes, in us. And I guess it's a bit of a joke in our house, put a microbe on it. It's like, have you got a spot? Have you got, is there somewhere outside that smells? Have you got a compost bin? We just use them everywhere. And through that experience, we've just seen the whole land blossom. So we've got so much biodiversity, snakes and newts and birds. And so for me, that's this real sign that this microbial life underpins biodiversity. So you can't see it, but you can see the effects of not having it, and how quickly it regenerates, it supports to regenerate, and how many health problems it's helped us to deal with as a family.
What sort of things have you dealt with?
So my daughter's constipation, she takes microbes every day now. I mean, she has done for a while now, and it really helped with that. I mean, we tried the route of, those, I don't know if anyone else has done this, but the laxatives. And they have to go into quite serious dosages. And she had this kind of blockage that they wanted to kind of, push out. And I was kind of a bit horrified by the levels of laxatives. And I just said, no. I mean, we did try it, but getting her to take 12 sachets of laxatives a day was just
it becomes ridiculous, doesn't it?
The top level of it is hard for them to eat. And so we just started microbes every day and twice a day. And I took a little bit of time, 6 months, and she now goes to the toilet twice a day regularly and is much happier within herself. So I kind of kicked myself that it took me so long, but there's the medical model, and I think obviously that has made huge strides in human health, and it's changed our lifespan and is incredible. And it's hard sometimes to figure out how to add to that.
And you learn by your experience as well. You get faced with a problem. And so how often was she opening her bowel before using the micro? Because I imagine it was quite slow if she was on that degree of laxative intervention.
Yeah, so it was, I think it built up over time, and I didn't really have my eye on it. She's a bit of a fussy eater, her sister less so. But I think it was kind of once every 3 days, and now she goes twice a day. When she was much younger, I was like, obviously, microbes everywhere. And she had a real reaction to that. Mummy, are you trying to spike me with your microbes again? And so it took a lot of conversations to be like, no, this is important, and we'll just see if it works. For me, our ethos as a family has always been, why not try a probiotic before you try an antibiotic? It's possible, to just see if that is going to impact. And we now know, of course, it has a lot of great impacts on urinary infections and things that, repeat urinary infections and skin health and stuff. So I've learned through that process to become more confident about trying it. But in terms of, where we were as a family, so I remember my mum saying about 10 years ago, gosh, how are we going to explain this gut health thing to people? Because, we started to learn about how microbes interact in the body, and it's been truly incredible to see how far we've come in a very short space of time.
The interest has exploded, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I think, and as well, just publicly, not even in the healthcare world, with things like the Zoe Project.
Amazing,
and Tim Spector's work, everything that's made it mainstream, and that's really exciting. And I remember seeing one of the first stool test reports that was part of this public study of stool analysis, and they'd renamed all of the microbes with human names so that people became a little bit more au fait with, get to know your microbes and get to know who you've got and who's missing, who's not there. So I think a big aspect is missing microbes, isn't it? Some microbes are just not there. They're not present anymore. So what do we do? How do we bring them back?
I think it's really hard. And, Tim Spector, I think, was head of a research project that looked at this in terms of, communities that live much more closely connected to the land in Tanzania. And I think we've lost kind of 100 plus different kinds of microbes between those kinds of communities that live much more in nature lives to more industrialized environments. And I think it is a big question and challenge for us in terms of if we regain, how we regain, or or maybe it's just about making the best of where we are now. And
are we meant to regain? Is this our adaptation to what we're dealing with in the world? Is
Yes.
this what we need? Do we need stronger, more dominant communities than we needed to do a particular defensive role? Because we've got the world a lot more toxic than it has ever been.
Yeah.
So perhaps it's
Are
an
we
adaptation that we try and support rather than work against it, because the intelligence of the microbiome is something we can't understand. I think there's so much we don't know about it.
I find that this is the bit that really excites me. And I find that, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is kind of human intellect and human greed. We've stumbled upon this incredible life force in the soil, in probiotics, in our stomach. This incredible, ancient actually, billions of years before we stepped onto the planet, this incredible community. And we know very little about it. And we know very little about how it kind of interacts and how it works for life. And yet there's this desire to kind of own it, capitalize it, break it down, dissect it, which I think has its place. This kind of advancement of knowledge is really important. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think in and of itself, the research is incredibly important. It's kind of what we do with that. So we've always come from the basis of, there's this incredible intelligent life force that lives in soil. We are going to harvest it and kind of rewild it, share it. And we go through a very strict process of making sure it's not in any way dangerous, it's not pathogenic, it doesn't have any bad guys in it. And it has we test it for what it does have in it in terms of the beneficial bacteria, and we regularly get the 15 strains. But there might be some stuff in there that we can't yet sequence.
When you say the 15 strains, what are the 15? What do you mean by the 15 strains?
So on our products, we regularly test our cultures from the mother seed culture all the way out to the end product, and we get the same kind of 15 families of microbes.
Okay.
And that's on our label. So we test for those, and they come in different kind of proportions, slightly different proportions, but it's amazingly regular and amazingly consistent for soil, which can have very different profiles. Yeah, for us, it's not. It's about recognizing the intelligence of the microbes and the body and the plant as being something that is valuable in and of itself, and that potentially we don't understand quite yet, and maybe we never will. I don't know, but there's something in that which has its own intelligence. Nature has its own intelligence.
Absolutely. And I think part of the human ego side is claiming to know it all. And I think that's a problem. I think I think we do need an acknowledgement that we still don't know an enormous amount about the microbiome of the soil, of the human, of animals. There's a lot that we need to discover, but it is such an exciting area, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you can feel the buzz around it in conferences and and I think that's partly because it's so exciting. There's so much we can do. There's so much we there's so many jobs they can do for us that can be helpful. Drainage and agriculture and human health. There's just so many possibilities for it to contribute positively to our lives in terms of different strains doing different things and communities. So it's really exciting.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the fermentation process? Is it like a fermented food? Is it similar to that, like sauerkraut or kimchi, or is it a different sort of process?
It is a very similar process. And I guess you could be forgiven for thinking that ours is kind of more on the kombucha side, but it is also does have its differences. Okay. So in terms of how we make our products, maybe every kind of month or 2 months, we go down to the edge of the forest on our land. So we have some forested area and some kind of area where we graze some sheep. And we dig a big hole and we take down a starch material as well as kind of some other bits of ingredients. And we dig a big hole and we bury that and we leave it for about 10 days. And when we pull it up, it has a really earthy smell. So it smells like really good kind of forest. And it also has this kind of slight sheen on it. Like if you've ever seen a microbial mat in Yellowstone Park, it's like a little bit like a rainbow, but kind of earthier colour. In the light, it kind of shimmers a bit. So it's a very beautiful kind of thing. And we then take that starch and we ferment it 4 times. So in the beginning, it's kind of a small demijohn. And we add in more molasses and more food sources for the microbes, and that kind of grows out to a bigger volume. And we do that 3 times. And we're very, this is Dad's kind of, my dad's passion, but he's very, he takes quite a lot of care in how we look after the microbes. So they're always kept at a certain temperature, kept in a kind of certain environment in terms of, at the business, we say we try not to have any fights in the brewing space, because it's try and keep it kind of calm and like a nice environment to be in. So that's from that seed culture, we brew it out 4 times. And in the last fermentation stage, for our gut health probiotics, we add in lots of traditional herbs and minerals. So we work with a medical herbalist who helps us to come up with our formulations. So, for example, in the Revive, we have L-glutamine and slippery elm, and this product was designed to really support the single-cell gut lining from the mouth to the bottom, try and make that as kind of robust as possible. So the herbs for us act a bit like a lunchbox for the microbes. So the microbes are the kind of delivering system. But they need something to deliver or to break down or to build back into bodies. So that's why for us it's really important to have the microbial strains from soil as well as the added ingredients. And for our soil products, it's humic and fulvic acid or mycorrhizal fungi. So there's this interplay, interaction between the microbes and the kind of food source. Dad says kind of the microbes act as the builders, and the fungi and the other bits are kind of like the architects. So there's this kind of interaction between the microbes we get from soil and also the added ingredients.
So say you mentioned slippery elm. Is slippery elm more accessible, more bioavailable when it's taken in this sort of formulation than if it was taken encapsulated?
I would love to find out. It's our intuition, yes, that there's this kind of, bearing in mind all of the herbs in our products are micro doses, so they're very, very small. They're nowhere near herbal medicinal doses. Okay. And the idea is kind of just to nudge the body along. But we definitely get feedback on the women's, for example, and all the herbs in there are designed to support, reduce heavy bleeding, support hot flushes, support the hormones. So we do get feedback that people have that experience. So there is this interplay, we believe, between the herbs and the probiotics. We're in a position now where we'd love to test so many elements of our products, Our soil-based microbes that work in these communities, it's our intuition that is good. We'd love to fully, try to start understanding the impacts of that, as well as the impacts of the fermentation with the herbs. So for us, it's really important that it is fermented. It's not just stirred in at the end, but that is given that 3-week, 4-week time to kind of interact.
I wonder if it's like the energetic signature of those herbs and plants and the things that you're adding in, because if it's micro doses, but people are still getting the results as though they were taking more of a medicinal dose of that particular herb or something. I wonder how much it's the energy of that compound mixed with the bacteria is really helping the body to just know what to do. Almost like a signal rather than a tangible volume of something. Is it communicating?
Yeah. I love that idea. I would love to find out more. And from our perspective, we really want to honour the kind of intelligence of the body. So we have something called Sustain, our kind of everyday probiotic, which is like 15 different herbs and 15 different microbial strains plus 50 herbs, minerals and juices. And the way that my dad designed that was like, I want to give the body as many different elements as I can and let the body decide, does it need the moringa? Does it need the vitamins? Does it need the zinc? Let the microbes in the body kind of decide what to take.
And you mentioned humic acid and fulvic acids. Can you explain what those are?
They're kind of minerals basically for soil. So it's making sure that the microbes have what they need to make things bioavailable for the plant. So they are kind of present in most healthy soils, but they need to be added into dirt or unhealthy soils. So the mycorrhizal fungi, the humic and fulvic acid, the microbes are all part of the kind of lunchbox of packaging that dirt needs to be transformed back into healthy soil.
So it's like an enricher. It's something that enriches the soil again.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we've had some questions sent in by the Gutology community. So let's go through some of those.
Great.
So the first question is, how long should one take probiotics before expecting to see results? That's a big question.
It's such a good question. So we've recently done a study of our key audiences, And what came back was 65% of people saw a result within 3 months, and 95% saw a result within a year. So that's a sample of 400 people, say, from our kind of warm list. So that shows us that there might be trends, but I would just say that everybody is so individual. Some people say within a week they see a difference. Some people take a lot longer. It depends on your lifestyle. It depends on your diet. It depends on where you live, potentially. And, different microbiomes respond differently to different strains. And that's why the whole world of probiotics is so mind-boggling, and why it's hard to make generalizations and health claims, which there's a big there's a watchdog, and it's important that companies don't say this will definitely do X, will definitely do Y, this strain will definitely do something, because it could be different in different people.
I often see it like a ratio of how many things is that person doing to rebuild their microbial community, and how many things is that person doing to damage the microbial community, and what does that ratio look like? Because actually you can tilt that ratio in a more of a regenerative favour, but if you're still exposed to quite a lot of other activities or emotions or other things in your life that are actually just degenerating, then you're not quite going to get the same results as somebody who's actually dealt with all of the things that could be destructive to the microbiome, and then they take the microbes, and within 3 months they are living their best life. You just can't compare. There's too many variables, isn't there?
I completely agree, and I love that analogy. And we're now finding out, science is finding out, that your microbiome changes every 20 minutes, or every, your stool sample is a real snapshot in time, but it could be very different the next day. So it really leans into this idea of balance in your life. So how can you find that balance day to day? And for me, that comes back to this principle of domination, which is like most microbes are swing voters. So there's 10% of microbes that are pathogenic, that lead to disease, that lead to kind of dysbiosis.
Okay.
There's 10% of microbes that are really beneficial, that do a lot of good for us. But most microbes are kind of in the middle, and they go to wherever is strongest. They go to whoever's in the majority.
So those middle ones can be good, or they can be bad, depending on who they're hanging out with, basically.
Exactly,
Wow,
yeah. It's a bit like secondary school.
Yeah.
So we're kind of this idea of constantly trying to support the good guys to outcompete on their own the dysbiosis, because they can do that. They can outcompete.
So we're looking from then the community aspect again, aren't we? Because school children is a really good way to understand it, isn't it? Because if you've got the big bullies in there and they recruit some people onto their side, that's going to be really disruptive to actually all of the rest. It's a very intriguing figure. 80% can just basically swing one way or the other. I did not know that it was 80%.
Yeah, 70. I think it's different in different ecosystems.
It's large, though, isn't it?
It is large. It's the majority, and I would say for me, it brings us back to this idea of balance. It's so important in our soils, in our ecological system. There's always this balance, this kind of search for this equilibrium, and for such a long time we've been trying to kill the bad guys.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like the war on drugs, we try to kill them, they get stronger.
Yeah.
And actually what my dad learnt a long time ago was it's microbial balancing technology. It's about adding in more of the good ones so that they themselves find balance. And what we find in many systems is if you add in microbes to a system for a certain amount of time, like your gut, after a while it can do that on its own. So it's not needed forever, but you need to be supporting that balance. And like you say, you need to have lifestyle factors that continue to support that balance.
It's interesting because we do stool tests in practice if someone's got some chronic health issues, so it can be very interesting to look at their stool sample and find out what sort of bugs they've got in there. But I would say over the years, it's the philosophy of how to approach it has really changed a lot to come away from just killing. So if you do identify something, you think, okay, well, we know that might be a trigger for an autoimmune condition, for example. But we don't just kill it. We need to understand it. So we need to not ask the question of what antibiotic do we need to use here, or what antimicrobial herb do we need to use here? We ask the question now of why is it there in the first place? What has allowed that to overgrow? Because probably at low levels, if it's in this mid category, if it could be good, could be bad, but it's gotten to levels that we know are pretty much pathogenic. But instead of just getting rid of it, because it would just come back without looking at the greater wider
root cause,
ecosystem. So we use lots of nurturing techniques to make sure that the gut lining is in good order, the mucus production is there, because then you're laying a good foundation for it to be inhabited by really friendly communities of microbes that will just gradually push it away. So you're not welcome here anymore. And then everything goes on happily ever after. But you can't do that with an antibiotic. Sometimes they're amazing. Sometimes you do need to kill.
You need to.
But, when you're looking at kind of chronic conditions and chronic gut change and microbiome adaptation, the more we can understand about the why it's got to that point really helps guide us to how do we fix it and then restore that normal community again.
I just think it's so inspiring, this idea of balance, and also this idea that nature left to its own devices internally and externally will do that. It's just keeping those pathogens under control, and what has caused this overgrowth of pathogens in all of these areas of our lives. But so I would say, in terms of how long should you take a probiotic, you should take a probiotic until you find your equilibrium. And then beyond that, you should use your lifestyle to support your good bacteria.
And would you recommend that people continue to take a live product such as yours, or would you actually say get to where you need to be and then just maintain it with a healthy lifestyle?
So we always support a healthy lifestyle. There's so much. If you took our probiotic and you lived the most unhealthy lifestyle, you still probably wouldn't get anywhere. No. It's like they have to go hand in glove. And I think what people are really looking for is solutions now, because they are facing really chronic health issues. And so there's this call to change, and I think we have to, as humans, be more able to respond to the idea of changing our lifestyles and changing our habits, and taking more responsibility for that process. But I would say some people take up probiotics, they take them forever. Quite a lot of people take them and they come off the subscription, they say, thank you very much, I'm in a really good place. And I also take that as a massive win. It's like, I don't think you need to necessarily take them forever, but if you're living in a situation where you've got a lot of chemical exposure, you haven't got a very good diet, you live in a polluted area or something like that, then the microbes can really support you. And they have really good antioxidant properties. There's so much now in terms of our chemical cocktail, which is about how badly our cells are getting hit by the things in our environment and our products. I hope that microbes have a role to play in this kind of detoxification of the body at the cell level. And I think that's really interesting going forward to think about. I'd love to see more research into that kind of area.
Okay, another question from the community then. Are there specific probiotics recommended for psoriasis?
There probably are specific strains that are more recommended for psoriasis. I would say, the skin is one of the largest organs in the body, and it responds to what's going on inside. So often we try to treat the skin separately from the body, and I would say skin stuff has an origin in terms of the gut and can be treated in both areas, so gut health as well as creams. And I would just say, if you have psoriasis or something like that, it's not that a probiotic will cure you, but it can help you to manage your symptoms and not be in that position where you feel so unempowered or powerless around it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's quite potentially misleading to say there's one bacteria for one condition because actually it's so much more complicated than that, and that's that sort of pharmaceutical extrapolation, isn't it, of like what can we get out of this microbe world and make it a medicine for a particular condition, which isn't really how it works. But I see a lot of psoriasis cases, and it's an autoimmune condition, and it is hugely linked to the gut in my experience. But there can be things that colonize in the gut that then give off a lot of endotoxin, LPS, and that can really trigger psoriasis, and I see that as a common thing that impacts people's skin.
What do you recommend to your...
So sometimes probiotics may be part of that picture, but it's more an understanding of why it's so inflammatory. Why is the environment so inflammatory? Because inflammatory environments in the gut is part of a defense strategy. So what are we trying to defend? Let's not just shut down the inflammation, although that's part of the management, but why is it fighting so hard? And then we just need to look at that and then calm it down when it's appropriate to do that. But never would I say this particular strain of probiotic is going to be helpful for that directly, because again, it would work in one and then never work again, because everyone's too different, aren't they? Some more detailed question. With so many beneficial bacteria now being cultivated in lab settings rather than through traditional natural fermentation as you guys do we still achieve the same diversity, metabolic output and nutrient density in the end product? And how do lab-grown strains compare to heritage or wild strains in terms of health outcomes?
So there's a few important things here to say, I think. And one is that most probiotic strains originally came from nature. So the big probiotic giants out there, they will have found their original strains from a natural system, and then they kind of those are kind of carved out of that natural system, tested for their beneficial properties, and then harvested in some kind of lab environment. Normally, for companies really trying to do the best for people suffering with certain issues, and combining those into strains of 2 to 10 different into products. So all probiotics are originally from nature. The second thing to say is we don't yet know the symbiotic relationship between different strains and how much they work together. And so that's what the lab-based probiotics potentially miss out on. Although if they're grown together in communities, that's one thing. But from my perspective, there's a lot from nature in terms of that symbiotic relationship that is beneficial. That is yet to be proven. I mean, that is an opinion. But, for me, it's about that kind of connection to ancient systems and nature that just naturally was there, that was so important for health that we've lost. So that's the second thing, is to say that, we don't yet know how much this symbiosis between the different communities is important for health. In terms of metabolic output and nutrient density, I'd say we just don't know yet. We just there's a lot to be learnt, and I would welcome just research in terms of this area and how we find out what is most beneficial for people.
Microbes have got their own communication networks, haven't they? They talk to each other.
They share lots.
They share information, and there's still a lot of that we don't really fully understand. So I wonder what message it sends to the gut if you take a single strain probiotic that wouldn't. Yes, the probiotic is origined in nature, but it wouldn't ever naturally occur completely by itself in isolation. No. So what message does that give on this subtle level, rather than just the tangible effect of the actual type of bacteria it is, to the microbiome? And the microbiome will surely have a response to that. So it is interesting. It's such a fascinating area.
And I would say, one of my biggest worries is about how this comes to fruition in the modern world, because there are so many companies out there that are bioengineering microbes for agriculture and for human health. There's quite a lot of gene manipulation. There's kind of, banks of microbes in like libraries that are being kept and kind of manipulated. And there's the whole phage world, which is all about, maybe in your packet of rocket that you buy from the supermarket, there's phages used in there to keep stuff alive. So there's quite a lot of biological innovation. The overall point is that there's a lot of engineering going on in the microbial world with very little understanding about this relationship. And that worries me, because we managed to create antibiotics which had an incredible benefit, but also had a downside with a certain level of knowledge that we had when they were created. And now we're a step on. We've taken a big step, and we're creating things again at the level of knowledge we have now. I imagine in 10 years we'll have a different level of knowledge, changed. Or 20. Yeah. So, I have struggled with this question of when is it okay to bioengineer stuff, or when do we need to just find out more before we create things that are not natural?
My particular clinical experience links the mitochondria in the cells, which are the energy-producing bits in the cells, and the microbes in the gut, because the mitochondria in the cells actually originated from bacteria being invaginated into the cells, and then this is how it was created. And so this subtle communication between all microbes will naturally connect with the mitochondrial function as well. So when I see people in clinic that have disorders that are largely rooted in mitochondrial dysfunction and microbiome dysfunction, you can't look at one without looking at the other. And so these things that even just taking a probiotic off the shelf, it's something to me that I think you have to be really cautious about, because particularly single strains, because we don't quite know the extent of that communication and then what it's having on the body.
What impact it's having, wow.
I think it's always going by how you feel, isn't it? And you know, if there is something that you wanted to try, then try it, but just check in with yourself after 3 or 4 weeks. Has it made me feel better? Did I get the benefit? And that is ultimately your answer, isn't it? But if you're not feeling quite right, things haven't been so good, your mood has been impacted, or, you know, it's for whatever reason that might be beyond all our knowledge, that's not the right thing for you. So I think it's okay to try these things, but any sort of long term, I'm going to take this and get my microbiome in order, might not be the right step to take without that sort of check-in process with yourself.
I would completely agree with that. It's like we've given quite a lot of our consciousness about our health and our power away to people who are being paid by big organisations to sell us drugs, and you know, going back to a system whereby we can check in with ourselves and tune in. How am I feeling today? How's my gut? How's my is this something that I feels like is good for me? I just would always encourage that kind of self-awareness and responsibility, and you know, because ultimately our health is our responsibility, and to take care of ourselves and to try and find the right things for us. There's so much stuff out there, and your body will tell you.
So what would you like to see in the future of the microbial world? What's your dream?
What's my dream? That's such a good question. I mean, I would just love us all to be more connected to natural systems, whatever way that means to you. So whether that's making sure you're going out for a walk at lunchtime to get some fresh air. I mean, one of the areas that we know helps with mental and physical health is connecting to nature, whether it's breathing the air outside, being in a forest, working with the soil. Now, I would say I'm more interested in figuring out ways that people can do that rather than trying to sell them something in a pill form or in that can help. So I think it's about changing our systems, and so that we're more connected to nature. And you know, I think we're at a tipping point now where we can start to see the really big impacts on soil health and on human health of the things that we've been doing that are damaging us. What I'd love to see is that tipping point just starts to gain traction in the opposite direction. So we're putting more microbes, more life back into our soils, and as humans, we're becoming healthier from a system that isn't that is natural, that is based on our connection to our world, and not something that's manufactured.
Yeah, so it's a change in mindset, isn't it? And real deeper understanding of our microbial world and our connection to nature. And it is actually how we're meant to live, isn't it? Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
And that's a wrap. Thanks to Julia and Katie for such a great conversation. You can follow Katie at Microbes Probiotics and Julia at JuliaDavies_nutrition. We'll see you next time.